Kindness means nothing to people who have never had to survive humiliation. The laughter around the private dining table rolled softly beneath the glow of crystal chandeliers as expensive wine swirled inside glasses worth more than most people's weekly groceries. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, downtown Chicago shimmered beneath a cold November rain, streets glowing gold beneath taxi lights and reflections of skyscrapers. Inside Cold Crown Steakhouse, every polished surface whispered money. Every tailored suit carried the confidence of people who had never once checked a bank balance before ordering dinner. And at the center of it all sat Ethan Cole, 34 years old, billionaire founder of Cold Crown Hospitality, the man business magazines called the youngest genius in luxury dining. Tonight, though, Ethan looked bored. Not tired, not stressed, just emotionally untouched by everything around him. Mason Reed leaned back in his leather chair with a lazy grin as a waitress passed their table carrying a tray of bourbon glasses. "You ever notice," Mason said, loosening his tie, "people are only kind when they think it benefits them?" A few men at the table chuckled. Ethan barely looked up from the amber liquid in his glass. "That's because kindness is transactional," another investor added. "Everybody wants something." Ethan finally smirked faintly. "Not everybody," he said quietly. Mason raised an eyebrow. "Still defending humanity?" Ethan glanced toward the restaurant floor, where servers moved carefully between tables in pressed black uniforms. "I used to," he answered. The conversation faded for a moment as soft jazz floated through hidden speakers overhead. Silverware clinked softly against porcelain. A woman laughed near the bar. Somewhere in the kitchen, a chef shouted an order. The restaurant breathed like a machine built for people rich enough to pretend life was beautiful all the time. Then Mason noticed her. "What about that one?" he said, nodding subtly toward the far side of the room. Ethan followed his gaze. The waitress stood near the service station scribbling orders onto a small notepad. Blonde hair tied loosely back. No dramatic makeup. No fake smile stretched too wide for tips. Just quiet focus. Calm movements. She looked different from the others somehow. Not polished enough for a luxury steakhouse. Her sleeves were slightly rolled from work. A tiny ink stain marked the side of her wrist. Ethan watched as another waitress complained about a demanding customer nearby, while the blonde woman simply nodded and picked up 2 heavy plates without saying a word. "Lily," Claire Donovan whispered as she approached the table with a bottle of wine. Claire was the restaurant manager, sharp-eyed and perfectly dressed, the kind of woman who measured human value within 3 seconds. "Her name's Lily Harper." Mason smirked immediately. "She looks too serious to work here." Claire laughed lightly. "She's been here 8 months. Never causes trouble. Takes extra shifts. Honestly, too quiet." Ethan kept watching her. Lily moved through the crowded dining room with careful precision, weaving between tables while balancing trays across one shoulder. But what caught him wasn't beauty. It was restraint. She looked exhausted, yet somehow gentle at the same time. Like someone forcing herself not to break in public. Mason leaned closer. Bet she'd still smile if someone treated her like garbage. Ethan's expression hardened slightly. Why would anyone do that? Mason shrugged. "Because it's easy." The others laughed again. Then Mason reached into his wallet and pulled out a novelty bill someone had handed him earlier outside a nightclub promotion. Fake $100 bill. Real enough at first glance. But across the center in tiny gold letters were the words, "Earn it." "Let's test something," Mason said casually. Ethan stared at the fake bill. "You're serious?" "Come on," Mason replied. "You own half the restaurants in this city and still think people are good. Let's see what happens when kindness meets humiliation." Ethan should have shut it down. He knew that. Somewhere deep beneath years of wealth and emotional numbness, a voice told him the idea was cruel, immature, pointless. But another part of him remembered endless fake smiles at charity galas, women pretending to love him, employees acting loyal before lawsuits, friends disappearing when investments failed. Kindness always came with conditions. Always. Mason slid the fake bill across the table. "What's the worst that happens?" Ethan looked toward Lily again. She was helping an elderly couple split dessert on his separate plates so they could share it more easily. The old woman smiled warmly at her. Lily smiled back. Small, real, unforced. Something about that irritated him unexpectedly. Maybe because sincerity looked almost dangerous now. Ethan slowly picked up the fake bill. "Fine," he said quietly. Mason grinned immediately. There he is. Claire looked uncertain. You boys are awful. But she was laughing too. A few minutes later, Lily approached their table carrying fresh bourbon glasses on a black tray. Can I get you gentlemen anything else tonight? She asked politely. Her voice was soft but steady. Ethan studied her up close now. Light freckles across pale skin. Faint shadows beneath tired blue eyes. Her name tag slightly scratched near the corner. Lily. Nothing about her screamed ambition or manipulation. She looked like someone trying to survive the week. Mason immediately leaned back with a charming grin. You've been incredible tonight. Lily nodded politely. Thank you, sir. Ethan noticed she never flirted. Never leaned closer for bigger tips. Never performed. She simply worked. Long shift. Ethan asked suddenly. Lily glanced at him, surprised by the question. Double shift, she admitted with a small smile. Friday nights usually are. Sounds exhausting. Rent usually is too. A few men at the table laughed softly. But Ethan didn't. Because she hadn't said it bitterly. Just honestly. Lily collected empty glasses one by one. Ethan washed her hands carefully. Small ink stains near her fingertips again. Artist's hands, maybe. Before she turned to leave, Mason casually slid the fake $100 bill onto the check presenter. For you, he said. You earned it. Lily looked down. For a brief second, surprise flickered across her face. Not excitement. Relief. Tiny, heartbreaking relief. Like $100 could genuinely change her week. Ethan suddenly felt something uncomfortable twist in his chest. But it was too late now. Lily picked up the bill carefully. Then she noticed the printed words across the center. Earn it. Silence hit her expression instantly. Not dramatic embarrassment. Worse, quiet humiliation. Around the table, a few men smirked into their drinks. One even chuckled under his breath. Ethan waited for anger. Or tears. Or at least visible hurt. Instead, Lily stared at the fake bill for 3 long seconds beneath the golden restaurant lights. Then slowly, she folded it in half. Her fingers trembled slightly. When she finally looked up, her eyes landed directly on Ethan. Not Mason. Ethan. As if she somehow knew he was the real decision-maker at the table. The restaurant noise blurred strangely around him. I hope, Lily whispered softly. Nobody ever teaches your future daughter that humiliating people is funny. Then she placed the fake bill gently back onto the table and walked away. No yelling. No scene. No anger. Just dignity. Ethan felt the air leave his lungs. The laughter around the table died immediately. Somewhere in the distance, a wine glass clinked against silverware. Rain tapped softly against the windows overlooking Chicago. But Ethan couldn't hear any of it anymore, because for the first time in years, someone had looked at him like money could not protect him from becoming small. Ethan remained frozen long after Lily disappeared into the crowded dining room. The folded fake bill still rested beside his untouched bourbon glass like evidence from a crime nobody else at the table wanted to acknowledge anymore. Rain slid slowly down the restaurant windows behind him, blurring the glowing Chicago skyline into streaks of gold and gray. Around him, conversations from nearby tables continued normally. A couple laughed near the bar. A waiter carried sizzling steaks through the aisle. Jazz music drifted softly through hidden speakers overhead. But at Ethan's table, something had shifted. Mason cleared his throat awkwardly and forced out a laugh. Well, he muttered, that got dramatic fast. Nobody answered. Ethan kept staring toward the hallway where Lily had vanished moments earlier. Her voice replayed in his head again and again. I hope nobody ever teaches your future daughter that humiliating people is funny. The words should not have affected him this much. He knew that. It was one sentence from a waitress he did not even know. But somehow it landed harder than every business insult, media attack, or betrayal he had experienced in years. Because she had not looked afraid of him. She had looked disappointed. Ethan slowly reached for the fake $100 bill. The cheap paper suddenly felt ugly in his hand. Cheap. Cruel. Childish. Relax, Mason said, trying to recover the mood. She will forget about it tomorrow. Ethan looked up sharply. Will she? Mason shrugged. Come on, man. You are acting like we ruined her life. Ethan glanced toward the service station again. Lily was standing beside another waitress now, quietly entering orders into the computer as if nothing had happened. But Ethan noticed something the others missed. Her shoulders were tighter than before. Her smile was gone. And every few seconds, she pressed her lips together like someone trying very hard to stay composed. Claire approached the table carrying the dessert menu. "Everything all right over here?" she asked carefully. Mason grinned. Your waitress almost made Ethan question capitalism. Claire laughed politely, but Ethan did not. "What is her story?" he asked suddenly. Claire blinked. "Whose?" "Lily." Claire hesitated for half a second before lowering her voice. "Honestly, I do not know much. She keeps to herself." Ethan kept watching Lily move through the restaurant. People like her usually need something. Claire leaned slightly closer. "Well, she does pick up every extra shift available. And she never spends money on herself. Same shoes for months. Same coat every winter." Mason smirked faintly. "Maybe she is saving for therapy after tonight." Ethan shot him a cold look sharp enough to silence the table instantly. Claire cleared her throat nervously. "Her mother is sick, I think," she admitted quietly. One of the kitchen staff mentioned hospital bills. Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. He looked back down at the fake bill in his hand. Suddenly, the entire game felt disgusting. Not because Lily had yelled, not because she embarrassed him, but because she had not defended herself at all. She had simply protected her dignity and walked away. Ethan stood abruptly. "I will be back." Mason frowned. "Where are you going?" Ethan ignored him and crossed the restaurant floor toward the hallway leading to the kitchen. The warm glow of the dining room faded behind him as stainless steel counters and fluorescent lights replaced crystal chandeliers and polished wood. Kitchen staff moved quickly between stations while orders were shouted over sizzling pans. The smell of garlic, butter, and grilled meat filled the air. Ethan spotted Lily near the employee lockers filling water glasses onto a tray. Up close, she looked even more exhausted than before. A loose strand of blonde hair had fallen across her cheek. She tucked it back absent-mindedly while balancing the tray against one hip. For a moment, Ethan almost turned around. He suddenly realized he had no idea how to apologize without sounding ridiculous. Lily noticed him standing there and immediately stiffened. Not angry. Careful. Professional. "Sir," she said politely. Ethan hated the distance in that single word. "Lily," he stopped. The kitchen noise swallowed his uncertainty for a second. "About earlier." Lily adjusted the tray slightly. "You do not need to explain." "I actually do." Her blue eyes finally met his fully. Calm. Tired. But no longer warm. "Was it funny?" she asked softly. Ethan opened his mouth, but nothing came out immediately. Because the truth was worse than cruelty. At the table, surrounded by wealthy friends and expensive whiskey, it had felt normal. Harmless even. That realization unsettled him more than anything. Lily gave a faint nod like she already understood the silence. "That is what I thought." She tried to step around him, but Ethan spoke again. "You were right." She paused. "About what?" Nobody should enjoy humiliating people. For the first time since he walked into the kitchen, something flickered across her expression. Not forgiveness. Surprise. Ethan lowered his voice. "I should not have let that happen." Lily looked down at the tray in her hands. People with money usually think embarrassment disappears after the check clears. Ethan felt the weight of those words settle heavily in his chest. Because somewhere deep down, he knew she was describing him perfectly. "You do not know anything about me," he said quietly. Lily let out a soft, humorless laugh. "I know enough." A cook shouted behind them as plates slammed onto the counter. Somewhere near the dishwasher station, someone cursed in Spanish after dropping silverware. Life continued around them while Ethan stood there feeling strangely exposed for the first time in years. Lily shifted the tray again. "I should get back to work." "Why did you say that thing about a daughter?" Ethan asked before he could stop himself. Lily hesitated. Then she finally answered without looking at him. "Because little girls learn how to value themselves by watching what powerful men laugh at." The sentence hit him harder than the first one. Ethan suddenly remembered his younger sister Sophie sitting on the floor beside him years ago while sketching cartoons into a notebook. Sophie used to believe people were fundamentally good. She used to defend strangers, donate birthday money, rescue injured birds from sidewalks. And after she died from leukemia at 17, Ethan slowly stopped believing in softness altogether. Success became easier than grief. Money became easier than connection. Lily glanced at him briefly. "Good night, sir." Then she walked away carrying the tray into the glowing dining room. Ethan remained standing beside the lockers long after she disappeared again. Somewhere nearby, a dishwasher hummed softly while scrubbing plates. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed faintly. Ethan rubbed a hand slowly across his jaw. He should leave. Forget this entire interaction. Tomorrow another meeting would happen. Another acquisition. Another interview praising his billion-dollar empire. Life would continue normally. But instead, he found himself walking deeper into the kitchen until he reached the small security office near the back hallway. An older security guard looked up from a baseball game playing quietly on a tiny television. Mr. Cole. Ethan rarely visited his restaurants unannounced, and almost nobody recognized him without a suit and media attention. Ethan nodded toward the monitor wall. Can you pull tonight's dining room footage? The guard looked confused but obeyed. A few moments later, black and white camera angles flickered across the screens overhead. Ethan watched Lily move between tables carrying plates, refilling drinks, helping elderly customers with their coats. She moved quickly but never carelessly. Then Ethan noticed something else. Near the end of her shift, another waitress accidentally dropped an entire tray of glasses beside the kitchen doors. Crystals shattered across the floor. Several employees groaned immediately. Claire snapped angrily from across the room. Do you know how expensive those were? The young waitress looked seconds from tears. But before Claire could continue, Lily quietly stepped forward, grabbed a broom, and started helping clean the mess without saying a word. She even smiled gently at the trembling girl beside her. Ethan stared at the screen silently. No cameras from the dining room could see that moment. No customers were watching. No tips involved. No reward. Just kindness when nobody was looking. Ethan slowly sat down in the chair beside the monitors. And for the first time in a very long time, the billionaire who believed everybody wanted something began wondering if he had spent years surrounded by the wrong people. The dangerous thing about quiet people is that you never notice how much pain they carry until you finally stop talking long enough to see it. Ethan did not sleep that night. The penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan felt colder than usual despite the soft amber lights glowing across the marble walls. Somewhere below, traffic moved through downtown Chicago like rivers of red and white light beneath the rain. The city looked beautiful from 40 stories above the street. Untouchable. Controlled. But Ethan sat alone in silence with a glass of bourbon melting slowly beside him, replaying the security footage from the restaurant on his tablet for the 5th time. Lily helping the young waitress clean broken glass. Lily carrying heavy trays without complaint. Lily quietly handing half her cash tips to the dishwasher near closing time when she thought nobody was watching. Ethan paused the video again. On the screen, Lily smiled softly at the exhausted dishwasher before walking away with tired shoulders and worn shoes. No performance. No audience. Just instinctive kindness. Ethan leaned back against the leather couch and rubbed his jaw slowly. He had spent years studying people. Investors. Politicians. Executives. Models. Socialites. Everyone always wanted access to something. Money. Power. Visibility. Protection. But Lily Harper moved through the world like someone who expected nothing from it anymore. Somehow that unsettled him more than greed ever had. His phone buzzed against the coffee table. Mason. Ethan ignored it. A second later, another message appeared. You are seriously still thinking about the waitress? Ethan stared at the screen for a moment before locking the phone completely. Across the room, the city lights reflected against the floor-to-ceiling windows while thunder rolled softly somewhere over the lake. Ethan stood and walked toward the glass slowly. His reflection stared back at him. Expensive watch. Tailored black sweater. Billionaire posture. Controlled expression. Yet for the first time in years, he suddenly disliked the man looking back at him. Sophie would have hated tonight, he thought quietly. The memory appeared before he could stop it. His younger sister sitting cross-legged on a hospital bed years ago with colored pencils scattered around her blanket. She used to sketch strangers constantly. Subway passengers. Nurses. Little girls in grocery stores. Sophie once told him, "You can tell who people are by how they treat someone powerless." Ethan closed his eyes briefly. Back then he believed her. Before cancer reduced kindness into something temporary and fragile. Before success turned human connection into negotiation. He looked down at the fake $100 bill still resting on the kitchen island. He should throw it away. Instead, he slipped it into his jacket pocket. The next morning, Chicago woke beneath pale gray clouds and freezing winds sweeping through the streets. Ethan arrived at Cold Crown Steakhouse before lunch service started. Employees moved around preparing tables, while soft instrumental music floated through the nearly empty dining room. Claire looked surprised when she spotted him entering through the front doors. "Mr. Cole," she said quickly, adjusting her blazer. "I did not know you were coming today." "I want to review operations," Ethan answered calmly. Claire smiled immediately. "Of course. We are fully booked tonight. Corporate clients from Boston are coming in at 7. Ethan barely listened. His eyes scanned the room automatically until he spotted Lily near the far corner polishing wine glasses beside the service station. She looked different in daylight. Paler somehow, more tired, but still composed. Claire followed his gaze and lowered her voice slightly. "She almost called off today." Ethan glanced at her. "Why?" Apparently her mother had another hospital appointment this morning. Claire shrugged lightly. But Lily never misses work. Ethan watched Lily tuck loose blonde hair behind one ear while checking reservations on the computer. Even from across the room, she carried herself carefully, like someone balancing too many invisible weights at once. "I want her section tonight," Ethan said suddenly. Claire blinked. "Your section? Table 12. Claire looked confused but nodded. "Of course." Ethan spent the next hour pretending to review restaurant details while secretly observing Lily from a distance. She greeted customers warmly, helped an elderly man adjust his chair near the window, smiled patiently at a screaming toddler throwing crackers across the floor. At one point, another server complained about splitting tips unfairly, and Lily quietly gave her part away without arguing. Ethan noticed everything, especially the small things. She always thanked the kitchen staff by name. She folded napkins carefully while listening to others talk. She carried herself with dignity even when exhausted. And somehow that made last night feel even uglier. Around 4 in the afternoon, Lily finally stepped outside through the employee entrance for her break. Ethan waited 30 seconds before following her. Cold wind swept sharply through the alley behind the restaurant as clouds darkened overhead. Lily sat alone on the back steps wearing a thin gray coat while eating half of a peanut butter sandwich from a plastic bag. Beside her rested a worn sketchbook covered in faded paint stains. Ethan stopped several feet away. Lily noticed him instantly and stiffened. "Am I in trouble?" she asked quietly. Ethan frowned slightly. "Why would you think that?" Lily gave a faint shrug. "Rich people usually only look for employees when something is wrong." The sentence hit harder than she intended. Ethan moved closer slowly. "Can I sit?" Lily hesitated before nodding once. Ethan sat beside her on the cold concrete steps while distant traffic echoed through the alley. For a moment, neither spoke. Wind rustled loose paper near the dumpsters behind them. Somewhere down the street, a siren wailed faintly. Ethan glanced toward the sketchbook resting near her knee. "You draw?" Lily looked down at it instinctively. "Sometimes." "Can I see?" Her fingers tightened slightly around the sandwich wrapper. "Not really." Ethan almost smiled. "That bad? That personal?" Silence settled again between them. Lily took another small bite of the sandwich while Ethan stared toward the cloudy skyline above the alley. "Claire said your mother is sick," he said carefully. Lily nodded slowly. "Heart condition. I am sorry. Everybody says that." Ethan looked at her. "What are you supposed to say to someone carrying that much?" Lily let out the faintest laugh. "Not bitter. Just tired. Most people say nothing. They just leave smaller tips." Ethan swallowed quietly. The cold wind suddenly felt sharper. "Last night," he started again. Lily interrupted softly. "You already apologized." "Not well." She stared ahead at the street. "You know what the strange part is?" Ethan waited. The fake money did not even hurt the most. He frowned slightly. "Then what did?" Lily looked down at the sketchbook beside her fingers. "For one second I thought it was real." Ethan felt something tighten painfully inside his chest. Lily continued quietly. "I already knew how I was going to use it." Her voice remained calm, but Ethan could hear exhaustion buried underneath every word now. "My mother's medication went up another $80 this month. I thought maybe I could finally catch up." Ethan looked away toward the alley wall because suddenly meeting her eyes felt impossible. "I am sorry," he said again, this time sounding less like a billionaire and more like a man realizing he had accidentally stepped on something fragile. Lily studied him for a long moment. "Why did you do it?" Ethan opened his mouth automatically with some polished answer about jokes or alcohol or stupid friends. But none of those excuses survived under her gaze. "Because I stopped believing kindness was real," he admitted quietly. Lily looked genuinely surprised by the honesty. Ethan rubbed his hands together against the cold. "People pretend around money, around power. Eventually, you stop trusting smiles. Lily glanced toward the restaurant doors behind them. That sounds lonely. Ethan almost laughed at the understatement. Before he could answer, Lily's phone buzzed softly inside her coat pocket. She checked the screen and immediately stood up. Fear flashed across her face for the first time since he met her. I have to take this. Ethan rose too as Lily stepped several feet away into the alley. Mom, she answered quickly. Ethan watched her expression shift while freezing wind whipped strands of blonde hair across her face. What happened? She whispered. Silence. Then Lily closed her eyes briefly. I will come after my shift. I promise. When the call ended, she remained still for several seconds before forcing herself to breathe normally again. Ethan suddenly realized something painful. Lily Harper was surviving life one day at a time, while people like him treated humiliation as entertainment. Some people become invisible because the world keeps teaching them that survival matters more than being seen. The rest of Lily's shift passed like a blur of warm plates, forced smiles, and aching feet. But Ethan noticed something had changed after the phone call in the alley. She moved faster now, quieter somehow, like every minute suddenly mattered. The dinner rush flooded Cole Crown Steakhouse by 6:30. Expensive coats brushed against polished chairs while wealthy couples filled the glowing dining room with laughter and clinking wine glasses. Outside, freezing rain painted silver streaks across downtown Chicago. Inside, everything still looked perfect. Yet Ethan could not stop watching Lily. She carried trays with steady hands, even while exhaustion darkened the skin beneath her eyes. She apologized when customers interrupted her, smiled when businessmen ignored her, refilled water glasses before anyone asked. But every few minutes, Ethan noticed her checking the time on the small watch wrapped around her wrist. At 7:15, Claire cornered Lily beside the service station, holding a clipboard against her chest. Table 16 says their steak is overcooked, Claire snapped. Lily blinked tiredly. I entered medium rare. Well, now they want it remade. I can fix it. Claire lowered her voice sharply. And stop looking miserable on the floor tonight. These people are paying hundreds of dollars to eat here. Ethan stood near the bar pretending to review wine inventory while listening carefully. Lily nodded immediately. I am sorry. Claire sighed dramatically. You are distracted. Again. Lily swallowed quietly before answering. My mother is not doing well tonight. Claire's expression barely softened. Everybody has problems, Lily. Wealthy guests do not care. Ethan felt irritation rise instantly in his chest. Claire noticed him nearby and straightened her posture immediately. Mr. Cole, she said with a polished smile. Everything all right? Ethan looked directly at Lily instead. Take 10 minutes. Claire blinked. Excuse me. She looks exhausted. Claire laughed nervously. We are slammed tonight. Ethan's voice remained calm. Then I guess you should help cover her tables. Silence. Nearby servers suddenly became very interested in folding napkins. Claire forced a smile tightly across her face. Of course. Lily looked genuinely confused. I can keep working. Ethan glanced toward her tired eyes. That was not a suggestion. For a second, something almost like gratitude flickered across Lily's expression before disappearing again. She quietly untied her apron and disappeared toward the back hallway. Claire waited until Lily was gone before lowering her voice. You are getting personally invested in an employee. Ethan looked at her calmly. Maybe I am just noticing one. Claire forced another small laugh, but Ethan could see annoyance tightening around her mouth now. He walked away before she could continue. 10 minutes later, Ethan found Lily sitting alone in the empty upstairs storage hallway near the employee lockers. The harsh fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead, while muffled jazz drifted faintly through the ceiling from the dining room below. Lily sat on the floor beside a vending machine with her knees drawn slightly toward her chest. Her sketchbook rested open across her lap. Ethan slowed when he realized she was drawing. Pencil moved softly across paper, while strands of blonde hair slipped loose around her face. For the first time since meeting her, she looked peaceful. Not happy, just somewhere else mentally. Somewhere quieter than the restaurant downstairs. Ethan stopped several feet away without speaking. Lily noticed him anyway. You are really bad at pretending not to watch people, she said softly without looking up. Ethan almost smiled. What are you drawing? Lily hesitated before slowly turning the sketchbook around. Ethan stared at the page silently. It showed a little girl sitting beneath a street lamp, holding a jar full of fireflies. The girl's face looked calm despite the darkness surrounding her. Ethan studied the details carefully. Tiny pencil shadows, delicate hands, light spilling softly from the glass jar. You drew this? Lily nodded once. It is beautiful. She looked embarrassed immediately. It is unfinished. Ethan sat down against the opposite wall across from her. So, Lily glanced at the drawing again. My mom always says unfinished things tell the truth better. Ethan frowned slightly. What does that mean? Lily closed the sketchbook halfway. Perfect things are usually fake. The sentence lingered quietly between them. Ethan leaned back against the wall while cold air drifted faintly through the hallway vents overhead. Your mother sounds smart. Lily smiled faintly for the first time all evening. She used to teach elementary school art classes. Used to. Lily looked down. Before the surgeries. Silence settled softly again. Ethan noticed her fingers absent-mindedly rubbing graphite smudges along the edge of the sketchbook cover. Artist's hands. Sophie had hands like that too. You stopped school? Ethan asked carefully. Lily nodded. The Art Institute. Ethan looked surprised. You got into the Art Institute of Chicago? For 1 year. What happened? Lily let out a quiet breath. Life costs money. Ethan suddenly hated how simple she made sacrifice sound. Do you miss it? Lily stared toward the hallway ceiling for a moment before answering. Every day. Downstairs, distant laughter echoed faintly through the floorboards while dishes clattered inside the kitchen. The restaurant continued moving like an expensive machine beneath them, while two completely different worlds sat quietly in a fluorescent hallway above it. Ethan glanced toward her sketchbook again. Why waitressing? Lily smiled weakly. Because hospitals do not accept watercolor paintings as payment. Ethan looked away briefly, ashamed by how hard that line landed. He had spent more money on wine tonight than Lily probably earned in weeks. Yet she still somehow carried herself with more dignity than most people he knew. Lily's phone buzzed again suddenly. Her expression tightened instantly when she checked the screen. Ethan noticed her hands trembling slightly before she answered. Mom. Her voice softened immediately. Ethan pretended not to listen while staring toward the hallway windows streaked with rain. Did the nurse come? Pause. No, do not apologize. Another pause. Then Lily closed her eyes tightly. I said do not apologize. Ethan heard weakness in her voice now. Fear. The kind people try desperately to hide because acknowledging it makes it real. I will bring soup after work, she whispered. And your medication. Silence. Then softer still. I love you too. When the call ended, Lily stayed motionless for several seconds. Ethan finally spoke carefully. Is she alone? Lily nodded without looking at him. Most nights. You should go home. She laughed quietly at the impossibility of that statement. And lose tonight's tips? Ethan immediately reached for his wallet before stopping himself. Because suddenly money felt dangerous again. Like offering it too quickly would insult her. Lily noticed the movement anyway. Do not, she said softly. Ethan froze. I was not. Yes, you were. She looked at him gently now, not angry anymore. Just tired. You do not have to rescue me because you feel guilty. Ethan swallowed slowly. What if I want to help? Lily studied him carefully for a long moment. Rich people always confuse helping with controlling. The honesty in her voice carried no cruelty. Somehow that made it worse. Ethan looked down briefly before asking, has anybody ever helped without wanting something back? Lily thought about it for several seconds. Then finally she answered quietly, my mother. Something about the simplicity of that answer cracked through Ethan's chest unexpectedly. Because he realized Lily still believed goodness existed despite everything life had taken from her. While he, surrounded by wealth his entire adult life, had stopped believing years ago. Downstairs, Claire's sharp voice suddenly echoed faintly up the hallway. Lily, we need you back on the floor. Lily stood immediately, slipping the sketchbook into her bag. But before she walked away, Ethan spoke again. What was the little girl holding? Lily paused beside the hallway door. Hope, she answered softly. Then she disappeared back into the glowing restaurant while Ethan remained sitting alone beneath fluorescent lights, staring at the empty space she left behind and realizing he had spent years surrounded by luxury without encountering a single person half as real as the exhausted waitress carrying soup home to her sick mother in the middle of a freezing Chicago night. Sometimes the people carrying the heaviest burdens are the ones still apologizing for taking up space. By the time Lily finished her shift that night, The streets of Chicago were almost empty beneath freezing rain and streaks of pale midnight light. Downtown storefronts reflected softly across puddles while cold wind swept wrappers and dead leaves along the sidewalks. Inside Coal Crown Steakhouse, the final customers drifted out one table at a time until only exhausted employees remained stacking chairs and wiping counters beneath dimmed chandeliers. Lily stood near the employee lockers, changing out of her black uniform shirt while rubbing tiredness from her eyes. Her entire body ached. Double shifts always hurt, but tonight felt heavier somehow. Ethan's face kept replaying in her mind unexpectedly. The strange sincerity in his voice upstairs. The way he listened instead of interrupting. The guilt in his eyes after the alley conversation. She hated that part most. Because people like Ethan Cole were not supposed to feel real. Men surrounded by private elevators, billion-dollar companies, and luxury penthouses usually moved through life untouched by ordinary suffering. But for a few moments tonight, he had looked almost lost. Lily shoved the thought away immediately. Dangerous thought, she reminded herself. Rich men could afford to feel guilty for one night and forget everything by morning. Meanwhile, people like her still had rent due. Her phone buzzed again as she slipped on her worn gray coat. "Mom, do not stop for soup. Just come home safe." Lily smiled sadly at the message. Her mother always did that. Pretended things were easier than they were. Lily typed quickly, "I am bringing soup anyway." 15 minutes later, she stepped out into the freezing rain carrying a small paper bag from the restaurant kitchen. Steam drifted faintly through the top beside containers of potato soup and bread rolls one of the cooks secretly packed for her every Friday night. Lily pulled her coat tighter and hurried toward the bus stop beneath flickering streetlights. Behind her, the glowing windows of Coal Crown Steakhouse reflected gold against the wet pavement like another world entirely. She never noticed the black town car slowly pulling away from the curb half a block behind her. Inside the car, Ethan sat silently in the back seat watching Lily through rain-streaked windows. "Sir," his driver asked carefully, "where are we going?" Ethan kept his eyes on the bus stop ahead. "Just stay back." The driver looked confused but obeyed. Ethan was not entirely sure why he followed her. Maybe guilt. Maybe curiosity. Maybe because after years surrounded by people performing versions of themselves for money or power, Lily Harper felt painfully authentic. The bus finally arrived with a hiss of brakes and wet tires. Lily climbed aboard while Ethan watched through the rain as she sat near the back beside fogged windows. 10 minutes later, the bus crossed from polished downtown streets into quieter neighborhoods lined with aging apartment buildings and faded storefront signs. Ethan frowned slightly. He had spent years investing in luxury developments across Chicago while barely noticing places like this still existed only a few miles away. Lily finally stepped off near a small 24-hour pharmacy glowing beneath buzzing neon lights. Ethan remained inside the car while she hurried through the rain toward the entrance. "Wait here," he told the driver before stepping outside himself. Cold rain soaked instantly through the shoulders of his coat as he followed from a distance. Inside the pharmacy, fluorescent lights cast everything in pale white shadows. Lily stood near the prescription counter counting wrinkled bills carefully from her wallet while speaking softly to an older pharmacist. Ethan stayed near the greeting cards pretending to browse. "This is all I have tonight," Lily said quietly. The pharmacist gave her a sympathetic look. "I can refill half the prescription now and the rest Monday." Lily nodded immediately even though disappointment flashed across her face for half a second. "Thank you." Ethan watched her hand over almost every dollar she carried. When the pharmacist disappeared into the back room, Lily quietly opened her paper bag and pulled out one bread roll. Instead of eating it herself, she slipped it carefully into the purse of an exhausted woman nearby holding two small children in oversized winter coats. The woman never even noticed who did it. Ethan stared silently. Again, kindness with no audience. No reward. No recognition. Lily collected the medication minutes later before stepping back into the freezing rain. Ethan followed from farther away this time as she walked 6 blocks through puddled sidewalks and flickering streetlights until finally reaching an old brick apartment building with cracked concrete stairs. She climbed slowly to the second floor, carrying soup in one hand and medication in the other. A warm yellow light glowed behind the apartment curtains. Ethan remained across the street beneath the rain, staring upward toward the window. Then something unexpected happened. Lily opened the curtains slightly after entering. Through the glass, Ethan saw a fragile older woman wrapped in blankets, sitting carefully on a couch. Lily immediately knelt beside her with a smile so soft it physically hurt to watch. She brushed damp hair away from her mother's forehead, helped arrange blankets, heated soup in a tiny kitchen. The apartment itself looked painfully small. Old furniture, peeling walls, weak lighting, but somehow warmth still filled the room. Ethan suddenly remembered the silence waiting inside his penthouse every night. Thousands of square feet, priceless artwork, imported marble, empty rooms nobody laughed inside anymore. Across the street, Lily sat beside her mother eating soup from the same bowl while smiling at something the older woman said. Ethan could not hear them through the rain and glass, but he could see love. Simple, exhausted, real. His chest tightened unexpectedly. "Sir?" The driver's voice startled him from behind. Ethan turned slightly. "How long have you been standing there?" "Long enough to know you are soaking wet." Ethan glanced back toward the apartment window one last time before returning silently to the car. The heater warmed the interior immediately, but somehow he still felt cold. As the car pulled away through rainy streets, Ethan stared out the window quietly while downtown skyscrapers slowly reappeared in the distance. "Can I ask you something?" he suddenly said to the driver. The older man glanced into the mirror. "Of course." Ethan hesitated. "Do you think people can forget how to be decent?" The driver thought carefully before answering. "I think people get comfortable enough to stop noticing when they are not." Ethan leaned back silently against the leather seat. Comfortable enough to stop noticing. The sentence followed him all the way home. 2 days later, Ethan sat inside a glass conference room 40 stories above Chicago while executives discussed a luxury expansion project worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Screens flashed profit projections across the walls. Investors debated customer demographics. Somebody joked about cutting employee meal costs to improve quarterly numbers. Ethan barely listened. Instead, he stared absently at a legal pad where one sentence sat scribbled repeatedly in dark ink. "Perfect things are usually fake." Lily's voice echoed inside his head again. Around the table, executives continued discussing profit margins while Ethan suddenly pictured her counting crumpled dollar bills under fluorescent pharmacy lights just to buy half a prescription. "Mr. Cole?" one executive asked nervously. Ethan blinked back toward the room. "Sorry. Continue." But his focus drifted again almost immediately. Because somewhere between fake tips, cold alley conversations, and rain-soaked apartment windows, Ethan Cole had begun noticing things his wealth once protected him from seeing. And the more he noticed Lily Harper, the harder it became to recognize himself. The hardest thing about meeting someone genuine is realizing how many fake things you once accepted as normal. Snow flurries drifted lightly across Chicago 3 nights later, dusting sidewalks and traffic lights in pale white, while Christmas decorations slowly began appearing across downtown storefronts. Inside Cole Crown Steakhouse, warm amber lights glowed against polished wood and crystal glasses as another packed Friday night unfolded beneath soft jazz music. But tonight Lily Harper moved through the restaurant differently. Still professional, still calm, yet more guarded now. Ethan noticed it immediately the moment she walked onto the floor. She no longer smiled automatically at him, no longer held eye contact longer than necessary. Every interaction between them felt careful now, measured like she was quietly rebuilding invisible walls. Ethan deserved that. He knew it. Still, something about the distance unsettled him more than it should have. He sat alone at table 12 nursing untouched coffee while pretending to review contracts on his tablet. In reality, he had barely read a single sentence in 20 minutes. His attention kept drifting toward Lily balancing trays beneath golden restaurant lights. "You are staring again," Mason said casually as he slid into the chair across from him. Ethan looked up with mild annoyance. "Why are you here?" Mason grinned. "You disappeared from poker night twice this week. I got curious." He glanced toward Lily instantly. "Ah, there it is." Ethan leaned back in his chair. "Do not start." Mason laughed softly. "You are obsessed with a waitress because she gave you a guilt trip." Ethan's expression hardened slightly. "That is not what happened." "Then what did happen?" Ethan looked across the room where Lily quietly helped an elderly customer button his coat near the exit doors. "She meant what she said," he answered quietly. Mason frowned like the concept itself sounded strange. "People say emotional things all the time. Not like her. Mason leaned back skeptically. You are romanticizing this because she did not kiss up to you. Ethan almost responded immediately, then stopped, because maybe Mason partly believed that himself. Wealth changed how people reacted to you. Ethan learned that years ago. Women laughed harder around him. Investors praised him before meetings even started. Employees feared disappointing him. Entire rooms adjusted around his presence before he even spoke. But Lily never performed for him. Even now. Especially now. Mason followed Ethan's silence carefully before smirking faintly. You know what I think? Ethan sighed quietly. I am sure you are going to tell me. I think you are trying to prove you are not the villain in her story anymore. The sentence landed harder than Ethan expected. Before he could answer, Claire approached carrying 2 whiskey glasses. Gentlemen, she greeted smoothly. Mason accepted his drink immediately, while Claire lowered her voice slightly toward Ethan. Small issue tonight. Ethan looked up. What kind of issue? Claire glanced toward Lily across the room. One of the corporate guests requested another server. Ethan frowned. Why? Claire hesitated awkwardly. Apparently Lily seemed distracted earlier. Ethan's jaw tightened instantly. She works harder than half this staff combined. Claire forced a polite smile. I know, but these guests spend serious money. Ethan stared at her calmly for several seconds before asking, Do you hear yourself when you talk? Claire looked genuinely caught off guard. Mason slowly leaned back, sensing tension immediately. Claire recovered quickly. I am just protecting the restaurant experience. Ethan glanced toward Lily again. She stood near the service station writing orders with visible exhaustion beneath her eyes. No, he said quietly. You are protecting wealthy people from having to remember employees are human beings. Claire's smile disappeared completely. I did not mean, I know exactly what you meant. Silence stretched awkwardly around the table, while nearby diners continued eating beneath soft candlelight, completely unaware of the shift happening only feet away. Claire finally nodded stiffly. Understood. Then she walked away. Mason stared at Ethan for a long moment before laughing under his breath. Wow. Ethan rubbed his temple tiredly. What? You are changing. Ethan almost answered automatically. Instead, his eyes drifted toward Lily again. Maybe I already started, he thought quietly. Around 8:30, the dinner rush intensified. Every table filled. Servers rushed between crowded aisles while kitchen staff shouted orders behind swinging doors. Snow tapped softly against tall restaurant windows overlooking Michigan Avenue. Ethan remained at table 12 longer than necessary, unable to explain why leaving suddenly felt wrong. Then he noticed Lily stumble slightly near the bar. Barely noticeable. Most people would have missed it completely. But Ethan saw her grab the edge of a counter for balance before forcing herself upright again. Seconds later, she continued walking like nothing happened. Ethan stood immediately. Mason looked up. Where are you going now? Ethan ignored him and crossed the dining room quickly. Lily was already lifting another tray when he reached her. You are pale, he said quietly. Lily startled slightly before regaining composure. I am fine. You almost fell. I skipped lunch. It happens. Ethan looked genuinely irritated. That is not normal. Lily gave him a tired look. For people like me, it kind of is. The sentence silenced him instantly. Nearby customers laughed over wine glasses, while soft piano drifted through hidden speakers overhead. Lily adjusted the tray against her shoulder again. I need to get this order out. Ethan reached for the tray before she could stop him. What are you doing? She whispered sharply. Helping. You cannot carry food into your own restaurant dressed like that. Ethan looked down at his black wool coat, an expensive watch. Fair point. Lily almost smiled despite herself before quickly catching it. Ethan noticed anyway. There it is, he said softly. What? An actual smile. Her expression immediately guarded again. Do not make this weird. Ethan surprised himself by laughing quietly. Real laughter. Not polished business laughter. Not cocktail party performance. Something simpler. Lily blinked slightly at the sound. You know, she said carefully. You look different when you laugh normally. Ethan tilted his head. Normally. Less expensive. For a second, they simply looked at each other beneath the warm restaurant lights while noise blurred softly around them. Then Claire's voice interrupted sharply from across the room. Lily, table 7 needs refills. Lily stepped back immediately, rebuilding emotional distance almost instantly. I should work. Ethan nodded slowly. At least eat something first. Lily hesitated before quietly admitting. I cannot afford to pass out tonight. Then she disappeared toward the dining room again, carrying the heavy tray. Ethan remained standing there longer than necessary while her words echoed inside his chest. I cannot afford to pass out tonight. Not I do not want to. Not I should not. Cannot afford to. He suddenly realized survival shaped every decision Lily made. Exhaustion, hunger, pride, fear, everything balanced against bills and hospital payments and responsibility. Meanwhile, he had spent years treating inconvenience like hardship. 30 minutes later, Ethan walked into the kitchen carrying 2 bowls of soup from the chef's station. Cooks stared in confusion as one of the richest men in Chicago carried trays through steam and noise like an awkward intern. Ethan ignored them completely until he spotted Lily beside the drink station entering orders into the computer. Without speaking, he placed 1 soup bowl beside her. Lily blinked in surprise. What is this? Dinner. I cannot. You can. She stared at the soup quietly. Warm chicken noodle. Crackers on the side. Simple. Human. Ethan leaned casually against the counter. No fake money this time. Something softened across her face before she could stop it. Small. Fragile. Real. Lily picked up the spoon slowly. Thank you. Ethan nodded once. You are welcome. Then for the first time since the night everything changed, they stood together in silence that no longer felt entirely painful. And somewhere deep beneath years of expensive walls, Ethan Cole began understanding something terrifyingly simple. The waitress he humiliated so casually was quietly teaching him how to become human again. The most dangerous moments in life are not when your world falls apart. They are when it finally begins to feel safe again. Snow covered Chicago completely by Sunday morning. Rooftops, sidewalks, and parked cars disappeared beneath soft white layers while freezing wind pushed through downtown streets lined with glowing holiday decorations. Inside her small apartment, Lily sat cross-legged beside the couch, sketching quietly, while her mother slept beneath a pile of blankets only a few feet away. The apartment smelled faintly of tomato soup and peppermint tea. Old Christmas lights blinked weakly across the windows despite missing bulbs. Lily's pencil moved softly across paper, while pale winter sunlight spilled through thin curtains. She was drawing Ethan again, or at least trying not to. The first sketch looked unfinished. Just the outline of a man standing beneath rain outside a pharmacy window. The second looked worse somehow, because she accidentally captured his expression too accurately. Sad. Tired. Human. Lily sighed softly and closed the sketchbook immediately. Dangerous thought, she reminded herself again. Men like Ethan Cole did not belong in real life. They belonged in magazines, interviews, and black luxury cars disappearing behind tinted windows. Not in tiny apartments with leaking pipes and unpaid medical bills. Her mother stirred slightly on the couch. You are drawing the restaurant man again. Lily looked up quickly. I am not. Her mother smiled weakly without opening her eyes. Artists lie terribly. Lily set the sketchbook aside. You should be resting. I am resting. Her mother slowly adjusted the blanket near her shoulders. Even simple movements exhausted her lately. Is he kind? Lily hesitated too long before answering. Sometimes. That usually means complicated. Lily let out a quiet laugh despite herself. Mom. Her mother finally opened her eyes fully and studied her daughter carefully. You have been thinking about him since Friday. Lily looked toward the frosted apartment window. He is not who I thought he was. Better or worse? Lily swallowed quietly. I cannot tell yet. Across the city, Ethan stood inside his penthouse kitchen staring down at a sheet of paper on the marble counter. It was not a business contract, not a restaurant proposal, just a handwritten employee file he requested from Human Resources 2 hours earlier. Lily Harper, 26 years old, former Art Institute of Chicago student. Emergency contact, Margaret Harper. Address, West Fulton District. Ethan hated himself slightly for reading it. Yet he still traced his thumb unconsciously along the corner of the page while remembering Lily sketching beneath fluorescent lights upstairs at the restaurant. Perfect things are usually fake. Her voice had become impossible to escape lately. He barely recognized himself anymore. Yesterday, he canceled a luxury launch dinner because one executive referred to restaurant staff as replaceable labor. Last night, he spent 40 minutes arguing with corporate managers about employee healthcare coverage. This morning, he stood alone in silence, thinking about a waitress who split soup with her sick mother in a tiny apartment decorated with broken Christmas lights. His phone buzzed sharply against the counter. Mason. Ethan answered reluctantly. What? Mason laughed immediately. Wow. Friendly. I am busy. Doing what? Writing poetry about your waitress. Ethan pinched the bridge of his nose tiredly. You are exhausting. No, you are obsessed. Ethan walked toward the penthouse windows overlooking snow-covered skyscrapers. I am trying to become less terrible. Mason snorted. Over one awkward prank. Ethan's expression darkened slightly. It was not awkward. It was cruel. Silence lingered briefly on the other end of the line. Then Mason's voice lowered slightly. You actually like her. Ethan stared down at the white streets far below. That is not the problem. Then what is? Ethan hesitated. I think she sees who I really became. Hours later, Ethan found himself driving through West Fulton beneath gray winter skies, holding two cardboard boxes in the back seat of his car. One carried fresh groceries. The other contained art supplies from an expensive downtown store. Sketch pencils, watercolors, heavy paper, things Lily probably stopped buying for herself years ago. He told himself he was just helping. Nothing more. But deep down he knew that was not entirely true anymore. When Ethan finally reached Lily's apartment building, he remained sitting inside the parked car for almost 5 minutes questioning the entire decision. Then he saw her through the second-floor window laughing softly at something her mother said. The sound could not reach him through glass and snow, but somehow the warmth still did. Ethan grabbed the boxes before he could change his mind and climbed the icy stairs. A few moments later, he stood awkwardly outside apartment 2B listening to muffled footsteps inside. Then the door opened. Lily froze instantly. Surprise flashed across her face. Then confusion. Then caution. Ethan. Snowflakes melted slowly against the shoulders of his dark coat, while he stood holding the boxes like someone completely unfamiliar with ordinary gestures. Hi. Lily blinked. What are you doing here? Ethan suddenly realized he had not planned an answer. He glanced awkwardly toward the groceries. I brought supplies. Lily stared at the boxes silently. Why? Ethan swallowed. Because nobody should have to choose between medicine and art. The hallway fell quiet except for distant pipes rattling somewhere inside the old building. Lily looked genuinely overwhelmed for half a second before her expression carefully guarded itself again. You cannot just show up here. Ethan nodded slowly. I know. This is not your world. The honesty in her voice hurt more than anger would have. Ethan looked past her accidentally into the apartment. Tiny kitchen. Old couch. Faded Christmas lights glowing weakly against the walls. Warmth despite struggle. Maybe that is the problem, he said quietly. Lily's mother suddenly appeared behind her wrapped in blankets. Well, she said softly with a smile. You must be the restaurant man. Lily closed her eyes briefly in embarrassment. Mom. Ethan almost laughed nervously. I am Ethan. Margaret. Her mother studied the boxes immediately. Please tell me those are groceries because my daughter keeps pretending soup counts as nutrition. Mom. Margaret ignored her completely. Come inside before you freeze. Lily looked horrified by the invitation. Ethan looked equally uncertain. But Margaret stepped aside anyway with the quiet confidence only mothers possess. Minutes later, Ethan sat awkwardly on their worn couch, while snow drifted softly outside the apartment windows. The boxes rested near the tiny Christmas tree in the corner, while Margaret inspected groceries with visible delight. Fresh fruit, she whispered dramatically. Lily, marry him immediately. Mom. Ethan laughed before he could stop himself. Real laughter again. Warm this time. Lily stared at him in surprise. Then slowly, despite all her resistance, the corner of her mouth lifted too. Margaret noticed instantly and smiled to herself while pretending not to. So, she said casually toward Ethan, how rich are you exactly? Lily nearly choked on air. Mother. Ethan burst into laughter again while Margaret grinned innocently beneath her blanket. What? I like details. Lily covered her face in complete humiliation while Ethan sat there laughing harder than he had in years inside a tiny apartment filled with weak Christmas lights and secondhand furniture. And somewhere between soup containers, snow-covered windows, and Margaret Harper openly interrogating billionaires from a couch, something dangerous began happening quietly beneath all the guilt and tension between Ethan and Lily. For the first time since the night of the fake tip, being near each other no longer felt like punishment. It felt like the beginning of something neither of them fully understood yet. The cruelest lies are not the ones people tell you. They are the ones you start believing after being hurt too many times. Snow continued falling across Chicago all week, covering sidewalks and rooftops in soft white silence while Christmas music drifted through department stores and crowded downtown cafes. But inside Lily Harper's chest, something far more dangerous than winter had started quietly growing. Hope. She hated it. Every logical part of her knew Ethan Cole belonged in a completely different universe. Men like him visited struggling neighborhoods as temporary experiences. They donated money, felt guilty for a while, then disappeared back into warm penthouses and private events where people forgot waitresses existed. Yet Ethan kept showing up. 3 days after visiting her apartment, he returned to Cole Crown Steakhouse carrying coffee for the entire morning shift because a snowstorm delayed deliveries. 2 days later, he personally argued with corporate management until employee sick leave policies were expanded across every restaurant location in Chicago. Yesterday, he somehow convinced one of the pastry chefs to teach Lily's mother how to make chocolate croissants through video calls because Margaret mentioned missing baking classes. Every time Lily tried building emotional distance again, Ethan quietly dismantled it without even seeming aware he was doing it. And somehow that scared her more than the fake tip ever had. Friday night arrived buried beneath freezing rain and Silver City lights reflecting across wet streets. Cole Crown Steakhouse buzzed with wealthy holiday diners wrapped in designer coats, while servers rushed beneath glowing chandeliers carrying trays of wine and expensive seafood towers. Lily stood near the service station adjusting silverware with careful focus when Claire suddenly approached holding a black envelope. "Private event tonight," Claire announced briskly. "Corporate gala upstairs." Lily barely looked up. "Okay." Claire handed her the envelope. "You are assigned to VIP service." Lily frowned slightly. "Me?" Apparently requested personally. Lily immediately looked uncomfortable. "By who?" Claire's expression tightened almost invisibly. "Mr. Cole." Lily's stomach dropped softly. "Upstairs. VIP gala." "Ethan." "Dangerous combination." "I can switch with someone else," she said quickly. Claire crossed her arms. "Trust me, if I had another option, I would use it." Then she walked away before Lily could answer. 30 minutes later, Lily stepped out of the employee restroom wearing the formal black evening uniform reserved for private corporate events. The dress itself was simple and elegant, paired with silver earrings Claire insisted matched the upscale atmosphere better. Lily felt ridiculous in it, like a little girl pretending to belong somewhere expensive. She adjusted the sleeves nervously while staring at her reflection beneath fluorescent bathroom lights. "You are working," she whispered softly to herself. That is all. But deep down she already knew tonight would not stay simple. Upstairs, the private ballroom glowed beneath crystal chandeliers while wealthy investors, politicians, and media executives filled the room with polished laughter and expensive perfume. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked snowy Chicago skyscrapers shimmering against the dark December sky. Waiters moved between tables carrying champagne, while a jazz quartet played softly near the stage. Lily stepped into the ballroom carefully holding a tray of wine glasses and immediately froze. Ethan stood near the center of the room, speaking with investors beneath golden light. Except tonight he did not look like the man who carried soup through restaurant kitchens or sat awkwardly inside tiny apartments eating canned cookies with her mother. Tonight, he looked exactly like what he was. Billionaire. Tailored black tuxedo. Perfect posture. Powerful men surrounding him automatically. Women laughing too hard at his jokes. Cameras occasionally flashing nearby. Lily suddenly felt stupid for ever forgetting the distance between their worlds. Ethan noticed her almost instantly across the room. His expression softened immediately in a way nobody else there seemed capable of reaching from him. He excused himself from the investors and crossed toward her. "You came," he said quietly. Lily tightened her grip on the tray. "I work here." Ethan smiled faintly. "Right." For a second, neither moved. The ballroom buzzed around them with crystal glasses and soft music while snow drifted beyond the windows. Ethan looked genuinely happy to see her. That somehow made things worse. "You look beautiful tonight," he said carefully. Lily's guard immediately rose again. "Please do not do that here." Ethan frowned slightly. "Do what?" "Forget this is temporary." Something flickered across his face. "Hurt maybe." Before he could answer, a sharply dressed older investor approached with a champagne glass in hand. "Ethan," the man laughed loudly. there you are. Then his eyes shifted casually toward Lily. And who is this? Ethan opened his mouth immediately. This is Lily. The investor smirked knowingly before Lily could even speak. Oh, that single sound carried enough assumption to make her stomach twist. Ethan noticed instantly. She works with us, he clarified sharply. But the investor only smiled wider. Of course she does. Lily suddenly felt heat rising into her face beneath the ballroom lights. She knew that look. Rich men collecting beautiful women beside them like accessories. The investor wandered off seconds later, still smiling to himself, while Ethan cursed quietly under his breath. I am sorry. Lily looked toward the crowded ballroom around them. This is your world, Ethan. Not all of it. Enough of it. Before he could answer, music shifted softly across the room as the event host stepped onto the stage microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, the woman announced warmly, thank you all for attending tonight's annual Cole Crown Foundation Winter Gala. Applause echoed through the ballroom. Lily immediately stepped back into professional mode, lifting her tray again. But then the host continued speaking. And now, please welcome the founder and chairman of Cole Crown Hospitality. Lily slowly turned toward the stage. The youngest luxury hospitality billionaire in Illinois history, Mr. Ethan Cole. Applause exploded across the ballroom instantly. Investors stood. Cameras flashed. Executives smiled proudly. And Lily felt the air leave her lungs completely. Ethan looked at her once. Just once. But it was enough. Because suddenly every confusing piece snapped violently into place inside her mind. The private table that first night. The employees recognizing him. Claire's nervous behavior. The expensive car. The executives. The way people moved around him instinctively. Ethan was not just rich. He owned everything. The restaurant. The gala. The room itself. Her heartbeat pounded painfully as Ethan slowly walked toward the stage beneath thunderous applause. Snow drifted outside massive windows while cameras flashed across his face. But Lily barely heard any of it anymore. Her mind replayed only one thing. The fake $100 bill sitting in his hand that first night while wealthy men laughed around him. Ethan stepped behind the microphone. Thank you all for being here tonight. Calm voice. Controlled posture. Billionaire confidence. The entire room listened instantly. Lily stared at him from the edge of the ballroom, feeling suddenly foolish for every moment she believed he might actually understand her world. Ethan's eyes found hers again across the crowd. And for the first time since meeting him, Lily realized something terrifying. She never truly knew who Ethan Cole was at all. The moment trust breaks is never loud at first. Usually it sounds like silence. The applause inside the ballroom continued echoing beneath crystal chandeliers, while Ethan stood confidently at the microphone thanking investors, donors, and executives for supporting another successful year of Cole Crown Foundation projects. But Lily barely heard a single word anymore. Her pulse pounded too hard beneath the elegant black uniform Claire forced her to wear. Around her, wealthy guests smiled proudly at Ethan like he belonged to another species entirely. Powerful, untouchable, admired. And suddenly Lily understood why he always seemed so comfortable inside luxury spaces, while she constantly felt like an outsider, trying not to breathe too loudly. Because Ethan did not visit this world. He owned it. The foundation raised over $12 million this year. Ethan continued smoothly from the stage. Cameras flashed softly across his face while investors nodded approvingly from round tables covered in candlelight and expensive floral arrangements. Lily stared at him in disbelief. $12 million. The number itself felt unreal. Her mother rationed medication because $80 extra nearly destroyed their monthly budget. Meanwhile, Ethan stood beneath golden lights, discussing millions like weather forecasts. Something sharp twisted painfully inside her chest. Not because he was rich. She already knew that. But because he never told her the truth. Every conversation suddenly replayed differently in her mind now. Ethan carrying soup into the kitchen. Ethan sitting awkwardly in her apartment. Ethan pretending to understand struggle while hiding an entire empire behind calm eyes and soft smiles. Humiliation burned hotter across her skin with every second. She should have known better. Men like Ethan Cole did not accidentally wander into lives like hers. They observed them, touched them temporarily, then returned to their real world untouched. Ethan finished speaking moments later beneath another wave of applause before stepping away from the microphone. The second his eyes found Lily near the ballroom entrance, his expression shifted immediately. Concern replaced polished confidence. He started toward her through the crowd. Lily turned away before he could reach her. "Lily," he called softly behind her. She kept walking faster through the crowded ballroom, carrying the empty tray against trembling hands. Wealthy guests blurred around her beneath chandeliers and holiday music, while embarrassment pressed heavily against her ribs. She reached the hallway outside the ballroom just as Ethan caught up beside her. "Wait." Lily stopped abruptly near the tall windows overlooking snowy Chicago streets below. Silence filled the hallway except for muffled jazz drifting through ballroom doors behind them. Ethan stepped closer carefully. "I wanted to tell you." Lily laughed quietly without humor. When Ethan hesitated. "It is complicated." "No," she whispered sharply. "It actually is not." Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. "Lily." She finally looked at him fully. "You own the restaurant." "Yes." "You are the billionaire everybody talks about." Ethan swallowed once. "Yes." "And you let me stand there thinking you were just another customer while your friends humiliated me for entertainment." Pain flickered visibly across Ethan's face. "I never wanted." "Do not." Her voice cracked softly before she regained control. "Please do not pretend this became noble afterward." Snow drifted slowly beyond the glass windows beside them, while distant traffic lights reflected across icy Chicago streets below. Ethan lowered his voice carefully. "I know I handled everything wrong." Lily stared at him in disbelief. "Handled?" She shook her head slowly. "You really still do not understand." Ethan's chest tightened painfully. "Then help me understand." Lily looked away toward the city lights before answering. "You got to walk into my life whenever you felt guilty." Her eyes returned to his. "But I had to live in mine the entire time." Silence crushed the hallway around them. Ethan opened his mouth slowly. "Lily, I care about you." She laughed softly again, but this time sadness filled it completely. "That is the problem." Ethan frowned. "What does that mean?" Lily's eyes glistened slightly beneath the soft hallway lights now. "I started believing you were different." The honesty in her voice hit him harder than anger ever could have. Ethan stepped closer instinctively. "I am trying to be." Lily shook her head immediately. "No, you are trying to feel better." The sentence landed like a knife because part of Ethan feared she might be right. Behind them, ballroom doors opened briefly as guests drifted through the hallway, laughing beneath warm light before disappearing again. Neither Ethan nor Lily moved. "Everything between us happened inside your world," Lily continued quietly. "Your restaurant, your money, your foundation gala. Even my job exists because you own it." Ethan's voice dropped lower. "You think I wanted power over you?" Lily looked exhausted suddenly. "I think people with power stop noticing when they have it." Ethan stared at her silently, because Sophie once said almost the exact same thing years ago. Lily folded her arms tightly against herself. "Do you know what the worst part is?" Ethan waited carefully. "For a little while, I forgot to be embarrassed around you." Her words shattered something inside his chest. Ethan rubbed a hand slowly across his jaw before speaking quietly. "You never needed to feel embarrassed." Lily looked at him with painful disbelief. "Ethan, I wore the same winter coat for 3 years while serving people who spend more on wine than my mother's hospital bills." Her voice trembled slightly now despite trying to stay composed. "You think that does not change how someone feels standing next to you?" Ethan suddenly hated every expensive thing attached to his name. The ballroom, the watches, the magazines praising him. All of it felt ugly standing beside a woman who counted grocery money in pharmacy lines. "I never looked down on you," he said softly. Lily's eyes finally hardened. "You did the first night." Silence. Brutal and undeniable. Ethan closed his eyes briefly because she was right. Completely right. Lily stepped back slowly. "You were bored, and I became entertainment. That is not who I am anymore." "Maybe not." Her voice softened painfully. "But it was who you were when you met me." Ethan felt every word settle heavily into his chest because nothing about her accusation was unfair. He remembered laughing at the table, remembered the fake bill between his fingers, remembered choosing cruelty because cynicism felt easier than kindness. Lily looked toward the ballroom doors again, where wealthy donors still celebrated beneath chandeliers and champagne. "I should get back to work." Ethan's expression tightened. "Please do not walk away like this." Lily studied him for several long seconds. Sadness replaced anger completely now. "You know what hurts the most?" she whispered. Ethan could barely answer. What? I think you actually became a good person after everything happened. Ethan's breath caught softly. Lily's eyes glistened beneath warm hallway lights while snow continued falling outside behind her. But I do not know if I can ever separate that man from the one who laughed while I stood there holding fake money. Then before Ethan could stop her, Lily turned and walked back through the ballroom doors carrying her empty tray into the glowing crowd, while Ethan remained alone beside the windows overlooking Chicago, finally understanding that sometimes changing was not enough to undo the person you once chose to be.